the Money Desk. Devan Murugan, good afternoon to you. This program has been dominated, hasn't it, by these dismal unemployment numbers. And I think we've now got the Statistician-General Risenga Maluleke on standby.
Yes, indeed, we do. And Jeremy, I mean, just before we get into him, the most significant or important takeout from today's numbers still stand. And that is 2.2 million people lost their jobs during April and June. I mean, this was when factories, mines and businesses shut down during the lockdown. The other important reflection, Jeremy, is that more than 10 million people are out of work overall when you consider the discouraged workers, the people that are no longer looking for work. This economy is not labour absorbing. That's the bottom line. Well, let's bring in the Statistician-General, Risenga Maluleke, just to get a little bit more on, first of all, on the number that was released today. Mr. Maluleke, thank you. It seems like a quote-unquote improvement, if you like, from 30.1% to 23.3%. It is an anomaly. It certainly doesn't mean that things have gotten better in the labour market, does it?
Devan, and again, greetings to the viewers. One of the things that we do as statisticians, we are never worried about the numbers that we make available in terms of being emotionally attached to them. All we do is to make numbers available. But we invest a lot more time in the crunching of those numbers so that they bring us a reflection of what is happening in society. Now, we are moving from the unemployment rate of 30.1% to 23.3%. And I know many speculators had said that the unemployment rate for this quarter, especially that this was the point where we had the highest levels of alert level lockdown. They had been speculating that it would be very high. But unemployment, Devan, it's a function of being able to actively look for employment and being ready to take up such employment when it's available. Now, people were on lockdown, they were at home, they didn't go out and actively look for employment because they couldn't move. And as regards those who, from the previous quarter, the first quarter of this year, who were unemployed were 7.1 million. This time, because people were not actively looking for employment, that number of people declined to 4.3 million. That is why we end up with 23.3% of the unemployment rate. But not enough. When you take those ones who actually fell off, about 2.9 million almost of those who fell off from the unemployed group category. And you also look at the employment side, where we had in the first quarter 16.4 million people, and we are now sitting at 14.1 million. We have about 2.2 million people who were employed, who are no longer employed. They didn't move into the unemployment category because they didn't actively look for employment during the quarter. So all of them moved, including some in the discouraged workship category. Work seeker category, about 400,000. All of them moved to the what we call other not economically active. Yep. And that amount in the not economically active, the people who moved from the employed category and the unemployed category are about 5.2 million people, which is the highest we have ever seen in our country since we started the quarterly labor force survey. And the main reasons they gave us were that because of COVID or the lockdown, they couldn't look for employment.
And that's the worrying part of it. So we understand that you've got to stay true to definitions if you want to be accurate. That's what you're telling us this afternoon, hence the number dropping from 30.1 to 23.3%. But the last part of your answer there, Statistician General, is the fact that, you know, when you mentioned the number of jobs lost in that period, we're still looking at 2.2 million people that have dropped out of work. So the unemployment number is really affected by that more than it is by new people entering the labour market. That's the worrying part of this, isn't it?
Well, we will see in future quarters when people start to actively look for employment. As of this quarter, the fact that people didn't actively look for employment and they were seated at home. And this definition is not there. We are not the only country that uses it. Countries all over the world, it comes from the International Labour Organization. It's called the narrow definition of explaining unemployment. Now, only 2 countries in the world that have seen unemployment increasing, only Canada and the United States. But otherwise, all the countries, this phenomenon that we see in South Africa is prevailing all over the world, with declining unemployment rates, as well as we have declining numbers of those that are employed. So, but the fact is, it is reporting what actually happened in society, because statistics is about what is happening in society. The fact is, people were not looking for employment during COVID-19. They were not actively looking for employment. They were seated at home.
But some parts of what's been happening on the unemployment scene is in this report. For example, the fact that youth largely remain in dire straits when it comes to work is there. If you look at the age bracket between 15 to 24, there's certainly no improvement there, is there?
Youth have generally been sitting at an unemployment rate of about 58, 59, closer to 60%. There has been a drop now in unemployment to about 52.8% as we are talking in the quarter under review, the second quarter. But that doesn't mean that all of a sudden about 6% or 6.6% percentage points of youth have gotten employment. It's because the number of those young people have actually moved over to what we call not economically active. That is, they are not employed, they are not unemployed because they didn't actively look for employment.
And then finally, I've got to ask you, Mr. Maluleke, if you're going to really take these numbers and calculate any comparative work, looking at the history or the future, because of the anomaly here, I mean, can we really use this for historical comparisons? Because certainly this is an anomaly. It's unlikely to happen again. How valuable are these numbers in that regard?
Firstly is that we can say, Devan, that we had COVID, and it is not going to shape the future of our world, and it is not going to say anything. It came, and perhaps when it has passed, we'll say it has passed. But that's not the case. COVID will shape new cultures, including cultures about work and everything. And these numbers will shape debate. Remember, when we make numbers, we have been producing numbers on the GDP for 7 decades now. When you want to look at issues of the behavior of the economy, just recently when we released numbers, there was a question, when last did we reach this level of 4 consecutive quarters of a declining economy, where it went in the negative? We had to go back as far back as 1991-92, where we had 8 quarters in a row. So the fact that COVID-19 is not an overnight event, and it will shape the future of our lives, these numbers become very critical, not only for researchers, but only for us who are statisticians. Because when we made these numbers available, we also looked at historic data that has been there over time since we introduced the quarterly labor force survey. So these numbers will become very critical in the future.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Risenga Maluleke, the Statistician General, thanks very much indeed.